Now old Cookie was some ugly, and he surely weren't no rose. If you lost him in a stampede, why, you could find him with your nose. Now Cookie wasn't scared of water. Shoot, he used it every day, making coffee, beans, and biscuits, but washing it no way. Now I ain't faulting Cookie, 'cause he could sure enough rustle grub, but he'd get just plain insulted at the mention of a tub. Cookie's apple pie was heaven, some sort of angel's blend, and punchers pert near fought for seconds, but they always ate upwind. Cookie's wagging it was spotless, plates and cups were shiny clean, but you mentioned bathing and old Cookie could get plumb mean. You really can't blame Cookie, he only had one shirt. It's just we never knowed which parts was cloth and which parts were grease and dirt. I roped a skunk for Cookie once, did it just for a joke, and when I drug him up to Cookie, well, I thought that skunk would choke. We lost old Cookie that year at the crossing on the Platte. Chuck wagon tipped over midstream and we only found his hat. Cookie never learned to swim, a fact too late found out. Course I always figured if watered right, old Cookie'd probably sprout. Why, he's likely making pine trees now with needles long and green. He lived his life in one old shirt, but he met his maker clean. They had headed out to Canyon, late autumn in the snow. The old prospector and his mule were loaded, traveling slow. He had buttoned high his collar and his hat was stuck down like glue, and they headed straight for Elko, 'cause, well, they wanted to. He chewed a twist of something that would most surely curl your hair, and his long beard matched his steel gray eyes with their penetrating stare. He moved with calm demeanor, seemed fearless through and through, and they headed straight for Elko, 'cause, well, he wanted to. His mule was short and wiry and had a face long and sad, and he had a way of traveling much like his owner had. They sort of seemed to fit together, their partnership was true, and they headed straight for Elko, 'cause, well, they wanted to. Now when they'd hoofed it into Elko, a bunch of cowboys gathered round, and see, they had just come off the roundup and they were shooting up the town. When they spied that old prospector, they decided what they'd do, and they circled up around him, 'cause, well, they wanted to. One asked the old prospector if he'd ever learned to dance. No, he said real cautious, I ain't never had the chance. So the cowboy pulled his six-gun and said, well, I'm up to teaching you. And he danced that night in Elko just as if he'd wanted to. Yep, he danced and dodged them bullets just like a jumping jack until he counted 6, then ceased to dance. Stepped quickly to his pack and held a shotgun in his hands. His voice was calm and cool, and he said, Sonny, let me ask you something. Have you ever kissed a mule? The young man's face contorted as he pondered his disgrace, and he stared with consternation at that shotgun in his face. He swallowed hard before he spoke. His voice came sharply through. He said, why, no, I ain't never kissed no mule, but I've always wanted to. See, I've never been much for shopping. In fact, I try to stay away from town except for when shipping time comes. I ain't too easily found. But the day come when I had to go, so I left the kids with Ma. But before I left, she asked me, could I pick her up a bra? Well, without a thinking, I said, sure. How tough can that job be? I bent down and kissed her, said I'll be back by 3. Well, when I'd done the things I needed to, I started to regret ever offering to buy that thing, and I started working up a sweat. I crossed the street to the lady shop with my hat pulled over my eyes. See, I couldn't take no chances. I didn't want to get recognized. Well, I walked right up to that sales clerk, never even hemmed or hawed. Told the lady straight out, ma'am, I'm here to buy a bra. From behind, I hear some snickers. So I turned around to see 15 women gawking and a-grinning straight at me. What style would you be looking for? Well, I just scratched my head. I'd only seen one kind before. Thought bras was bras, I said. She gave me a disgusted look. Said, sir, that's where you are wrong. Come with me, I heard her say, and like a dog, I tagged along. She took me down this alley where them bras was on display, and I thought my jaw would hit the floor when I seen that lingerie. Well, all these different styles and shapes like I'd not seen before. Figured I'd go crazy before I left that woman's store. While there was bras you'd wear for 18 hours, and bras that crossed your heart, and bras that lift and separate, and that was just a start. While there was bras that made you feel like you weren't wearing one at all, and bras you can train in for to start out when you're small. Well, I finally made my mind up, picked a black and lacy one. Told the lady just to bag it up, and I figured I was done. But then she asked me for the size. But I didn't hesitate. I knew them measurements by heart. I said, 6 7/8. 6 7/8, she said. Well, surely that's not right. Well, yes, ma'am, I'm positive. See, I measured them just last night. I thought she'd go in shock. Must have caught her by surprise. When I told her my wife's bust was the same as my hat size, that's what I used to measure with. I figured it's fair. But, well, if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, ma'am. That just drew another stare. By now a crowd had gathered, and they was a-cracking up when the lady asked to see my hat so she could measure for the cup. When she finally had it figured, I gave the gal her pay, turned to leave the store, and tipped my hat and said, good day. My wife had heard the whole story before I even made it home. See, she had talked to 15 women that had called her on the phone, and she was still a-laughing, but I didn't care, 'cause now she don't ask, and I don't shop for no more women's wear. Now, I ain't scared of grizzly bears, old Snuffy says one day, and wolverines and catamounts to me is pure child's play. Them tarantulas and scorpions, well, I'll prance around 'em bold, but partner, them old rattlesnakes, they make my blood run cold. I lariats my bed each night, my boot is tall bull hide. I don't like being on the ground, shooting all, that's why I ride. Despite these nifty safety steps, I knows that I'll get bit, and I conjugates on remedies to use if I get hit. My old case knife is razor sharp to slash across each hole where that booger's fangs went in. Still, it chills me to the soul to plan self-mutilation. Although it's necessary in sucking that there poison out, to me it's awful scary. I reckon I could do it though if my life were on the line, 'cause I remember when that critter bit my hoss, Sweet Adeline. Now that pony was a kicker. Of that there's paltry doubt. No man on earth could suck his leg to get that pison out. So his eyes, they glazed over, and sweat just drenched his hide. He shuddered, and then he staggered, and I stood there as he died. Sometimes I lay awake at night pondering on this and gets to speculating on this hypothesis. Say now, Soddy, just for instance, we're out hossback someday, and old Cookie's beans has grabbed me in a most emphatic kind of way. Now I got no time to tarry. No, sir, I'm in a rush. But propriety dictates that I got to find some brush. Well, I gets there, but just barely. There's no time to scout around. And say, in this bush is a viper all coiled up on the ground. Now I don't sees him, but he sees me, and he feels crowded some. So he calculates trajectory and bites me on the bun. So here I am all wounded, but I know what must be done. So fishing out my old case knife, I carve X's on my bun. But I do this by braille, you see. I'm operating blind as I carves out love and kisses all over my behind. But I can't suck the pison out, 'cause folks ain't built for that. Then I thinks of you, Soddy, and yells and waves my hat. So you rides up and I tells you the awful fix I'm in. I'm checking all my bets to you, just you can save my skin. My eyes is glazing over now. My sun is sinking fast. I'm remorseful of my sin-filled life and regret my pinto past. This nightmare here is well water clear, I picture in my mind. I'm dying there. The question is, now, Soddy, can you find it in your heart to help a pal whose friendship is devout? And save my life by sucking all that rattler's pison out. 'Cause the cowboy code, it tells the obligations of a friend. It says, I quote, a pal must be faithful to the end. Well, Soddy rolled and lit a smoke and said, you're right about the cowboy code, but it don't cover sucking pison out, and that faithful to the end you quote, I'd say is misdefined. It dang sure don't require me to tend to your behind. If you get bit, I'll fan your face and help the time pass by. I'll speak soft words, but partner, I believe you're gonna die. It's cold out here on the prairie, and the wind chills down to 22. I'm watching a Texas blue norther roll in, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do. 'Cause the tanks are froze pretty near solid, and my handle broke off my best axe. The feed's getting wet from a hole in the roof where it's leaking all over the sacks. And I'm feeding more hay than I'd planned on 'cause the snow covered up all the grass. The tractor's broke down and the pickup won't start, and the roads are as slick as glass. It's the 24th day of December, and the sagebrush is covered with ice. And I think a hot cup of coffee or a warm bedroll would sure be nice. 'Cause my feet are so cold I can't feel them, and my fingers are pretty near froze. There's icicles hanging off my mustache from the drip dripping off my nose. I was hoping I'd get to quit early and be back at the home Christmas Eve. But these baldies are crying and hungry, and there's no one to feed them if I leave. There's one other thing I might mention, a fact that's painfully clear. I'm so broke I can't pay attention, so I guess I'll spend Christmas out here. But it's pretty out here on the prairie. where the stars light the cold wintry sky. And though I can't remember when things was much worse, I guess I'm still a right lucky guy. 'Cause I got a good woman who'll love me no matter what time I get home, and my youngin' is happy and healthy, though I wish he weren't quite so near grown. And I got this new 3-year-old filly who's better than I ever dreamed, and my old spotted paint is as good as they come, so things ain't as bad as they seem. I got no cause for being ungrateful, and to gripe and complain ain't good, 'cause there's people all over this country who'd trade places with me if they could. So I know I'll have a good Christmas in spite of my problems somehow. I'll just watch as this Texas Blue Norther rolls in and sing Silent Night to the cows. Now, young Jack Porter was a man that knowed the way of steers, from bird nests in their hairy tails to ticks that chawed their ears. A Texican and cowhand, to the saddle bred and born. Why, he could count a trail herd on the move and never miss a horn. But one day on the tally back in 1884, he got to acting dreamy and sure did miss the score. Now the old boss, he knowed the symptoms. Jack, you ain't no good like this. I'll give you just 10 days to go and find out what's amiss. Amiss is what ailed him. See, he had fell in love for sure with a gal named Cordy Eddy. Mighty purty, sweet and pure. Jack must have rode 100 miles sweating with the thought of sweet-some words to ask her with, the way a cowboy ought. I'm just a humble cowhand, Miss Cordy, if you please, that hereby ask your heart and hand upon my bended knees. It sounded simple, thus rehearsed upon the trail, but when he come to Cordy's house, his words all seemed to fail. 'Twas howdy, ma'am, and how's the crops, and how's your ma and pa? Why, the words he had practiced just wouldn't come at all. He took her to a dance one night, and the hoss she rode was his. He's a dandy little horse, she says. Well, yep, says Jack, he is. They rode home late together, and the moon was rising high, and Jack, he got to talking about the stars up in the sky, and how they'd guide a trail herd, just like seagoing ships, but words of love and marriage just wouldn't pass his lips. So he spoke about the hoss she was riding. He said, you'll know he's fancy gaited and don't never fight his head. He's sure a little dandy, she agrees, and he's a sigh. Jack says, why, you can have him. That is, maybe when I die. He figured she might savvy what he meant, or maybe guess, and give him that sweet answer he longed for, namely yes. But then he reached the ranch house. He was still wondering how he had ever popped the question, and he had to do her now, or wait and sweat and suffer till the drive was done this fall, when maybe she'd be married and he'd lose her after all. Well, he put away her saddle and led his pony to the gate. Reckon I'll be drifting, ma'am, it's getting kinder late. Her eyes were bright as starlight, and her lips looked sweet as flowers. And Jack asked, now this here pony, is he mine or is he ours? Our pony, Jack, she answered in a voice was soft as moss. Then Jack claims he kissed her, but Miss Cordy claims he kissed the hoss. Away up high in the Sierra Peaks where the yellowjack pines grow tall, old Sandy Bob and Buster Jiggs had a roe deer camp last fall. Now they had taken along their hosses and branding irons and maybe a dog or two, and they 'lowed they'd brand every long-ear calf that came within their view. And any old doggy that flapped long ears and didn't brush up by day got his long ears whittled and his old hide sizzled in a most artistic way. Now one fine day, old Sandy Bob, he throws his cigar down, says, "I'm sick of the smell of this burning hair, and lows I'm going to town." So they saddles up and hits 'em a lope, for it weren't no sight of a ride, and those were the days when a buckaroo could oil up his old insides. Well, they start her in at the Kentucky bar at the head of Whiskey Row, and winds her up down by the depot house some 40 drinks below. Then they sets up, turns around, and goes the other way, and to tell you the God-forsaken truth, those boys got stewed that day. Now as they was a-riding back to camp, a-packing a purty good load, who would they meet but the devil himself, a-prancing down the road. Says he, "You ornery cowboy skunks, you'd better hunt your hole, for I've rid up from hell's rim rock together in your souls." Says Sandy Bob, "Well, devil be darned, we boys is kinda tight, but you ain't going to gather no cowboy so thou want some kind of a fight." So Sandy Bob, he punched a hole in his rope, and he swang her straight, and he also swang her true. He lapped it on the devil's horns, and he's taking his dallies too. Now Buster Jiggs was a Riata man with his gut line coiled up neat. So he's taken his out and built him a loop, and he's lassoed the devil's hind feet. Oh, they stretched him out and tailed him down while the irons was getting hot, and they cropped and swallow-forked his ears, and they branded him up a lot. They prued him up with a dehorning saw and tied knots in his tail for a joke, and then they rode off and left him there, neck to a blackjack oak. So if you're ever a pie in the Sierra Peeps and you hear one hell of a wail, you'll know it's that devil a-battling around about the knots they tied in his tail. In a western town in the days of old, 'fore the mines played out for the lack of gold, the folks there seized the opportunity and built 'em a right smart community. They built 'em a school where the R's were taught, and they built 'em a church on a corner lot. And they painted it white with a steeple high to greet town folks as they is a-passing by. Now they had 'em a sheriff, a judge, and a mayor, but they needed a preacher to make things square. So they sent back east, as was the general rule, and hired 'em one fresh from divinity school. When Sunday come, he was all decked out to preach his sermon, whisper and shout. But when he stepped out to the podium, it was all too obvious no one had come, except for one old cowboy in a pew back there in his Sunday shirt and his greased-down hair. He sat there quiet and just watched the floor with an occasional glance towards the church's door. Time stood still for the longest while till the preacher coughed and faked a smile. "Guess we can try her again next week." But emotion reigned and he could hardly speak. His demeanor was that of a scolded pup, and as he turned to leave, old Jake spoke up. "Now hold on there, preacher. It ain't your fault. And them there doors ain't like no vault, 'cause there ain't no locks to keep folks out. If you don't preach now, old Satan's one about. Now if I was to haul out a load of hay, and only one cow showed, she'd get fed that day." Now this preaching man in the last few days had found it hard to cope with these western ways, but he figured as to how he had found his call, from this profound man with his western drawl. So he fixed his collar and he stood up straight and he began to expound upon the pearly gates. And he amazed himself at his own recall of the book he waved, chapter, verse, and all. It was God Almighty's omnipotent power, and he lectured on for over an hour. Then the wages of sin and hell's brimfire, and he didn't weaken and he didn't tire. He was a jumping and a screaming and a pounding the floor when he noticed old Jake weren't awake no more. Well, this made him mad, and he stomped back to the pew and shook Jake's shoulder and said, I weren't through. You're the one that told me about the cow getting fed, and now here you are acting like you're in bed. Well, you're right there, preach, about them things I told you. If I was that load of hay, it'd still hold true. That cow'd get fed. 'Tis a cowboy code. But I wouldn't feed her the whole darn load. They called him Pert Near Perkins, for unless that booger lied, he had pert near done most everything that he'd ever tried. He'd pert near been a preacher, and he'd pert near roped a bear. He met up with Comanches once and pert near lost his hair. He'd pert near wed an heiress who had money by the keg, and he'd pert near had the measles once and pert near broke his leg. He'd pert near been a trail boss, and according to his claim, he had pert near shot Bill Hickok, which had pert near won him fame. Now, mostly all the fellas on this lazy SB spread, they sort of took his talking with a grin and let him fight his head. But one, named Tom McInnes, sort of told it to him rough. He said, you're working for an outfit now where pert near ain't enough. We tie our last rope to the horn, and what we catch we hold, and pert near is one alibi we never do unfold. In fact, I'll tell you right now, no words I ever hear sound quite as plain darn useless as that little pair pert near. Well, that's how old Tom McInnes laid it out upon the line, and like a heap of preaching talk, it sounded mighty fine. But one day, Tom McInnes, while riding off alone, he lamed his horse and had to catch some neighbor nester's roan to ride back to the ranch on. And somewhere along the way, a bunch of nesters held him up, and there was heck to pay. Tom said, I never stole the horse. I just bought it to ride. But them nesters, they hated cowboys, and they told him that he lied. Why, they took him for a horse thief, and they'd caught him with the goods, and they set right out to hang him in a nearby patch of woods. They tied a noose around his neck and throwed it over a limb, and Tom McInnes pert near knowed this was the last of him. Then suddenly a shot rang out from somewhere up the hill, and them nesters dropped the rope and run, like nesters sometimes will when bullets go to whizzing. Tom's heart leapt up with hope to see old Pert Near Perkins riding toward him at a lope. Looks like I pert near got here just in time, old Perkins said, to see them nesters hang ya. Tom's face got kinder red. You pert near did, he pert near grinned. They pert near had me strung. You're looking at one cowboy who's pert near just been hung, and one who's changed his mind, for no word ever said can sound as sweet as pert near when a man's been pert near dead. His skin was like leather, and he walked with a limp. and talked with a slow Texas drawl. His knuckles were knotted, his left thumb was gone, said a stud bit it off last fall. We knowed he was lying, we'd watched him dally it up, but it ain't healthy to call him a liar. It was Saturday night before the wagon went out, and he was setting his new kid on fire. We had heard all his stories about the place that he's been, and we all think Jake's pretty strange. He looked over at me, said, "I'm schooling this boy about the unwritten laws of the range." He said, "Son, a man's brand is his own special mark. It says, 'This is mine, leave it alone.' If you hire out for a man, ride for his brand and protect it like it was your own." He said Mr. Wagoner come out here in 1903. This country was sagebrush, mesquite trees, and sand. He carved him this ranch out of blood, sweat, and guts, so you be proud that you ride for this brand. If you hire out to string barbed wire, then build a fence. It don't matter if it's 4 or 5 strand. Remember, it was you who was asking for the job, so don't gripe when you ride for this brand. Mr. Wagoner don't hold with complainers. He'll fire one before they can quit. So if you don't like our outfit, head down the trail and find a hoss your saddle will fit. But if you get up early and catch your own bronc, show the boss that you're making a hand. Mr. Wagoner will be there to cover your bets as long as you ride for his brand. He said the winter I spent at the Sixes, we had a man on the old Taylor place. He rode up on some hiders a skinning a cow, and he squared off with them scamps face to face. Yep, he could have rode off and never looked back, but he just weren't that kind of a man. We found him in Ash Creek, all shot up. Nakona Joe had died for the brand. We all know the old man tells a windy or two, like the one about losing his thumb in Nakona. He was killed in a bar in Fort Worth by the demons in a bottle of rum. But I got to thinking about what he'd said, and the more of it I understand, the more I believe we'd all be better off if more people would ride for the brand.